Hey guys, I'm Elizabeth, the curly-haired country gal. Now, what I'm about to show you has been over a year in the making, and so I am so excited to present to you the rabbitry. Now, the basic needs of humans and animals includes food, water, and shelter. So I'm going to show you how I'm going to take care of those things in this setup. I'm going to kind of start with the big picture and then show you some of the finer details of the setup that I have. I'm also more than happy to share with you what's been working and what hasn't been working and changes that I plan on making already. Let's do this thing. Okay, so starting on the outside of this shelter, it's 30 feet long by 30 feet wide. It's made of 10 by 10 dog kennels that are 6 feet tall. So each square has 100 square feet. Now there are 2 buck pens, one for a buck to be in each, and there's a common area for the does, and then there's 3 pens on the side that I'm planning to use for kind of a rotational grazing setup. Now I have no idea how long it's gonna take X number of rabbits to mow down the grass in each of those pens, but the idea is that they'll work on one where the forage in those other 2 pens is regrowing. So now this still looks largely like new construction because it is, but this is only going to get better with time. So right now there's a lot of dirt, a lot of rocks, but especially when the rains come again and after I sow some seed, then this is going to be way better in subsequent years. And of course this new construction look comes because of those deep trenches that I dug to bury the fence. Originally I was thinking about making the whole thing level, but I thought that's totally impossible. So now it has this terrace look, which I ended up really liking, but it ended up being so much digging. I did use a trencher for part of it, but it didn't work super well on the hills, so it was just me and my pickaxe and blisters. So then around the entire perimeter and on a lot of the inside there's chicken wire, which I clipped on using rabbit cage clips and rabbit cage clippers that I just was able to get from Orscheln in the town nearby. And of course Junebug, our sweet puppy, is always nearby and a little bit sad that she can't go into the pen yet because she's a little too excited around the rabbits still. But this chicken wire also divides up the grazing pens so that, of course, the young kits, when they're born, can't squeeze through and go to the other sides. So then, back to the front, the doors, of course, like the walls, are dug out, more digging. And then I used this, it doesn't matter really what you use, but I had this extra 1-inch welded wire that I put on the bottom and the top of the fence to prevent any rabbits from getting out from the bottom or from the ground level. And the biggest problem with this door right here and the other door is that there's no chicken wire right at the bottom, and there are some burrows down there along the edge. The ground was pretty soft, and so right away when there were some rabbits in there, they figured that out and they ran down there and kind of dug that out. Oh, and there's Ice Cream. We'll see more of him in a little bit, but I think right at the time of filming he's around 10 weeks old, so I'm hoping that a few months from now he'll be ready to start breeding. And then of course both doors are paved, either with large rocks or with cement blocks. Now taking a look at the roof, or quote-unquote roof, anybody looking at this will go, that's not going to keep anything out, and you're absolutely right. So this roof setup is simply a mental barrier for hawks to not swoop down and get the rabbits. It is just bird netting that's kind of threaded together, and that is put over these PVC pipes. And I'll talk more about how I got the PVC pipes to stay there in a little bit. But this is not to keep raccoons out or possums. There is this Premier One electric netting fence that goes around the perimeter. And so far during the day I have not had any problems over the past 2 years with raccoons or possums getting my chickens out in the orchard, as well as foxes and things like that. Again, the chickens sometimes get out and the rabbits sometimes get in, but I haven't had any predator issues. So I'm hoping that's the case with the rabbitry. But if there does become a problem with the rabbitry, my plan is to put some rods around the top corners and string some wire and put some sort of electric battery, some battery on that to electrify it, I guess. And if raccoons or something does climb up, it'll get the shock at the top of the fence. But so far, no problems with that. And then over top of about 2/3 of it almost is this 20-foot by 20-foot sunshade. And my husband had this awesome idea that I think he got from his parents back in Colorado, and that was to put 2 T-posts to kind of cinch them together. So one of them's in the ground and the other one is upside down, and I secured them using 2-inch pipe straps, metal pipe fitting straps. I forget what they're called. With shade cloths, every 10 feet that you go laterally, you're supposed to drop a foot. I don't think I quite have those dimensions here, but those other corners are clipped to the fences and at an angle, so of course the water can run off. So just looking at this setup, I'm really happy with it overall, but one thing that I underestimated was how close to the ground I needed to try to get the chicken wire. So for a lot of the perimeter, I filled back in the holes before I put the chicken wire on, and if I could redo it, I would put the chicken wire around the perimeter before I filled the holes back in. There are some holes that small rabbits might be able to still get through that I'm going to have to repair or fill in before we have babies. But around the perimeter I did put some logs to try to prevent anything from getting in or out, and some cement blocks where needed. So this is only going to be a problem with the kits because the size of rabbits that we have, they won't be able to get through the chain link anyway. But for those babies, I want to make sure that they can't get out. All right, well, let's take a look inside. So right off the bat, when I opened the door, I have this metal shelf that we're not using that I went ahead and secured across the entrance, especially because I have 4 young kids and I'm out there with them most of the time. But if a rabbit's wanting to bolt out or get scared by somebody else in the pen, I don't want them to have an easy way to run out, especially when there's babies. So we put that up there as just a little baby gate, I guess. And then of course I have to close the door because Junebug is close behind and very, very interested in the rabbits. So like I mentioned before, there's 3 grazing pens, and the first of which is open now. Chicken wire on the outside, chicken wire in between. And then here I have the doors dug out, which, again, so much digging. And that is kind of terraced. And so I laid and secured bricks using some landscape adhesive. And so there's this one kind of weak area where there's dirt for now, and we had a big storm recently, and that got some of that dirt kind of spilled back over. So I'm gonna just have to kind of keep a little hand shovel nearby to get that dirt out so I can still open the doors. And for support, I put up this wall of 4 by 8 by 16 blocks, and I supported it with rebar and secured it with that landscape adhesive. And that's something that you can just apply with a caulk gun. But with that big storm that came in recently, it had been really dry for quite a while, and then all of a sudden we got this downpour about a week ago, and it shifted things quite a bit. So that's unfortunate. So I should have put more rebar in. So that's just one thing to keep in mind. If you are gonna dig into the ground because you want to have a colony where your rabbits are able to dig, then you want to support the ground. And so I should have put more rebar in. This had been straight, but now obviously the ground pushed it and broke some of that adhesive. So thankfully the whole thing didn't collapse because of the rebar in there, but I'm gonna need to support that better probably. So there's some spillage there, but I'm still really happy with how this has turned out. And then one modification that I realized really quickly that I needed was to put some sort of stop inside the doors on both sides to prevent the ground from spilling down all the time. And so on this side I put some pieces of wood that had angles cut into them, so I just was able to tap them in with a hammer. And then here on the other side I drove a T-post in, and that'll hopefully prevent them from burrowing in there as well. Okay, so on to the feed. Now I had actually purchased some 2-inch by 1-inch welded wire to cut and make a little feeder to go kind of a semicircle on the doe side, and then little quarter circles, I guess, inside each of the buck pens. But I ended up finding a an old fence that we weren't using, and it had the same size wire that I wanted. So this is a little bit makeshift, I guess. It doesn't look exactly like I had envisioned, but it looks pretty much like I had envisioned. And so I secured that on the doe side and the buck side, and the reason that I put it here was because I wanted it to be pretty low maintenance as far as how I was going to feed everybody. So with this setup, I only have to go to one place and I can feed all 3 areas. So I like that. And I did go ahead and also put this mineral block here as well. I don't know how many people do that or how necessary it is, but I think it was pretty inexpensive at the animal feed store, so I thought I would get it. Oh, here come the cicadas. Can you hear those? Now I have a bowl here where I do have some pellets, and I actually have a 5-gallon bucket with some pellets and some extras, I think still in the back of my truck. And these I got from the woman that I got some of these rabbits from. But my hope in the future is to not feed them any pellets. I've been inspired by some of the colony raising groups on Facebook, and Emma Thompson has a channel where she raises rabbits in a colony setup, and she has been transitioning from pellets to whole grains and then now to none. And that's my goal as well, because I want this to be really low maintenance, but also low cost. So what she's has been doing, and what I plan to try and do, is forage in the spring, summer, and fall for food for the rabbits, and then just use hay in the winter. And because of course anytime there's hay cut, there's going to be different plants in there as well, some clover, whatever else. And I'm going to give that a try. And so around here on our property, there's about a cumulative acre that we mow. And so I actually have this lawn sweeper, and so when I mow, it takes maybe an hour and a half every week or every other week, and I catch a lot of clippings. And it's grass, but it's also clover and plantain and whatever else that I don't even know what it is. But that's what I've been feeding them and plan to continue to feed them. But actually, just today, I mentioned to one of my neighbors that I wanted to feed my rabbits for the winter with hay. And it's time to cut the fields. This is the 1st of July. And so just this morning, my neighbor surprised me by coming by with some grass that the pastor down the road had just cut on their property. So Lord willing, I'm gonna be set for the winter. I have the best neighbors, guys. So then, like I mentioned, this is the same on the buck side, so it's just one place to dump all the food. Now for water, I went ahead and decided on this 5-gallon bucket using these nipple waterers. And so far it's been working great. I haven't seen the rabbits drink out of it too much, but it's been a couple weeks, so they definitely would have died if they weren't getting any water by now. And my kids have seen them drinking out of them. Very low maintenance. On the doe side, there's one with 4 nipples in it for them. And then on the buck side, it's just one bucket with a hanging nipple on the one side, and then going through the fence, there's another side nipple for the buck on the other side. So then it's only 2 waterers that I have to mess with instead of 3. And then dividing the bucks from the does, I have these sheets of PVC light. That's the same thing that we used to cover our chickshaw that Justin Rhodes recommended. And so I thought it would be a great thing to use. I couldn't think of anything that would be just as durable and just as inexpensive. And so I used 3 sheets to go around there to prevent the the bucks and the does from breeding through the fence, and to keep the kits out of the buck pens so that the bucks wouldn't kill them if they wanted to. And then of course I just drilled holes in it and secured it with some wire. Now for this PVC is, some of it is secured with ropes just to make it stand up better and not be so wobbly. And then it is 1/2-inch PVC, and it's a 10-foot piece, and then there's a 1/2-inch coupling, and then there's other pieces that range from, I don't know, 12 to 15 inches or so. And I think I glued some of them, didn't glue others of them, but then that PVC just slides over the 1/2-inch rebar. So I cut lots of pieces, lots of 3 to 4-inch pieces of rebar, and then I drilled a hole in the chain link fence and put the rebar in, and then put the PVC over it. So now as far as shelters, the whole purpose of having, well, one of the purposes for me of having a colony for rabbits is so that they will burrow, because I want the does to burrow and have their kits underground where it's cooler in the summer and where it's warmer in the winter. And so they've been doing a great job of that so far, but I also wanted to have some above ground shelters so that when there is a lot of rain or if there's some flooding and maybe the ground floods, that they would have some places above ground to rest as well, or to hide. So I think I've been pretty successful at that, of having some places for all of them to be. So I was able to get this doghouse from town for pretty inexpensive, and it's an insulated doghouse, so I'm super excited about that. And it was really heavy, but really well made by another one of the pastors in town. And so I have that as a shelter. And then a bonus is that already the does have been digging underneath it, and right now there's a doe underneath there that she spends most of her day underneath there, or at least when I'm outside she's under there. So that's one of the shelters. And then I kind of have this pallet as another kind of pseudo shelter. It doesn't totally hide them in, but it's another place where they can be underneath something. And then up into the doe common area a little bit, I have just this folding chair just sitting over another burrow that they've started, just to kind of encourage them to keep digging under there. And then right next to it I have this structure that I originally made to keep my chicken feed dry up in the orchard, and that I ended up not needing it up there, so I brought it down here. And I'm hoping that they'll start to burrow in that as well. And I made this using some recycled vinyl siding and some leftover PVC light from making the chickshaw back a couple of years ago. And then, just the other day, when I was trying to find more things to use as shelters, I found this decrepit old wheelbarrow, and I thought, that's perfect, that would be a great shelter. So there is a hole in it, and I might even just duct tape over that, because it's been getting worse. But that's another shelter that they have been loving so far. Just within minutes of me putting it into the rabbitry, one of the rabbits, Oreo here, was already underneath it. So there's definitely room for all of them to hide. Now, there has still been a little bit of rabbit drama. As you can see, there's been a little bit of chasing and pulling of hair, but I think they've all settled down by now, and I think they have their pecking order, and I think they're all really happy in here. And I'm really happy that they're in here. And then another bonus that I have found in this setup already has been rabbit manure. So as you probably know, rabbit manure is a cool manure, so you're able to put it directly into your garden. And this is something I'm really excited about with having rabbits. Not only can you raise meat prolifically and feed them for very inexpensive because they're herbivores, but also the waste that they make is perfect for gardens. So I'm so excited about this. And what I've heard is that rabbits will tend to start to poop all in the same place and have their own kind of little litter box. And so I can see that already happening in one of the buck pens, which is great. So that's going to make harvesting the manure really easy for me. But that's something that I'm really excited about as an awesome bonus of having rabbits. And now it's time for some rabbit TV. The does we have so far seen here are Angel and Lemon. Next you're going to see Snow White. The black and white one we renamed to Oreo. The bucks that you'll see a little bit later are Ice Cream and Chocolate. You'll never guess which one is which. And the one that you don't see here, my kids renamed Sunny, and she's the one who spends most of her day underneath the doghouse. So enjoy some rabbit TV. thanks so much for joining me as I toured the rabbitry. I'm excited about this, and I think it's going to work really well. So I'd love for you to tell me in the comments what your rabbitry looks like, or if you're going to start rabbits soon, what you're looking forward to. So thanks so much for joining me.